You're watching YouTube, the cable access of the 21st century. It's Wednesday, it's 4 p.m. where I am, and it's time to talk about movies and answer your questions. Welcome to Dan's World. How about now? Should be good. Audio. The people can't hear you. Here's the weird thing. Literally, right before I went on the air, I made sure that my audio setting was correct, that it was this microphone. And then I went live, and the thing decided to switch back. It wants to switch to my iPhone microphone, and I have no idea because I made sure to double check right before we started the show that my audio was set properly. And StreamYard, I don't mean to call them out, still switched the input. I don't know what's going on there. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again. I'm so sorry about that. Maybe I should have checked. Can you hear me before I started going on my spiel? But it's too late for that. It's in the past. It'll get cut out on the audio version that you can watch or listen to and watch on Spotify. Anyway, hi. Welcome to Dan's World. Can you see me? Can you hear me? That's what I started off with. I also said that this is the first show that I've done in a little while because the summer is weird. The schedule is weird. The embargo dates are strange for movies. The embargo was up on the Odyssey last week. It's just been kind of a weird time. I'm traveling around a lot, so we are a little bit less consistent with scheduling, but I'm going to try to string a few together if I can over the next few weeks. I've got a lot in store for you. For all you lip readers out there, John Boy Media, you already know what I'm doing on today's show because you can read the lips, whereas most people probably aren't John Boy Media. Today, we're going to talk about the Odyssey, but not the Odyssey that you can see in theaters, versions of the Odyssey that don't even exist in the physical reality yet or in this physical world and actually never will exist in this physical world. We're going to discuss that. We're also going to talk about one of the most prominent box office research sites, not Box Office Mojo, but the numbers. The numbers, if you'll recall, if you watch Charts with Dan, if you'll watch Charts with Dan, you'll know that the numbers went down earlier this year, kind of mysteriously, came back up at a fraction of its functionality. That mystery has now been solved, and strangely, it involves AI as well. I don't mean to make this show all about AI. It's just that AI is in the news a lot with Hollywood these days, and it's not always great news. Plus, we are going to talk about the reopening of a Hollywood icon, which I think is a kind of a good news, bad news scenario. And of course, we're going to take your questions. So if you have questions that you want me to answer, you can send in a super chat. I will definitely get to all of the super chats today. Please no ranking questions. Ranking questions are a little bit difficult for me to do on the fly, but any other questions you have, I'll answer them here on the show after we get through all of the other news that I want to talk about. Plus, you never really know where the show is going to take you. That's the magic of being live and doing live stuff. But let's jump right into the first thing I want to talk about today, and that is the Odyssey. The Odyssey, of course, is in theaters now. And one of the things that I think has been a big draw for the Odyssey is that it is a great example of Christopher Nolan's approach to filmmaking. One of the big things in the publicity campaign has been how he did as much as he possibly could practically, that he committed to the reality, shooting in real locations, all of that kind of thing. But there are now a couple of different entities that have said, okay, but what if we did the Odyssey and told it the opposite way? Because there are two AI pure AI versions of the Odyssey that are reportedly on the way. One of them a little bit more put together than the other one. Let's start with the one that you might not have read about in the news. This is a movie called Odysseus the Fall. It's 135 minutes long. It's from an AI studio called Fountain Zero. It's from director Ash Kusha. Now, Kusha had an AI film called Dreams of Violets that was about the 2026 massacre of protesters in Iran that came out earlier this year. It actually played at Tribeca. But this is much more of not that. And the approach to this, at least from the publicity, seems to be a little bit more akin to the strategy of a studio like The Asylum, where they use the prominence of a box office hit or a cultural sensation to, let's say, up the boost the ego, not the ego, boost the visibility of the project that they're working on. Because this is what the director of the film said. We very much hope that Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is a raging success at the box office. So a bit of a different motivation from the other one we're going to talk about. And in some way that our version of the journey of Odysseus might further that success by bringing to theaters those who might not otherwise come out to see the film simply because they are curious to see the ultimate in human creation and compare it to one man's collaboration with AI. This is from the executive chairman of the studio, Tom Rogers. He says, we wanted to provide a basis of comparison in the same time frame with a movie, The Odyssey, coming from one of the world's most revered directors, so moviegoers might be curious enough to see both films developed out of the same classic tale as a way to better understand the level at which AI is able to both contribute already to the art of filmmaking and to increasing the amount of quality films that can be offered to the public. So really the strategy behind this is, hey, we hope that The Odyssey from Christopher Nolan is a huge hit. So what we want to do is bring ours to, they say theaters. So obviously they have some kind of ambition for a theatrical release. We want to bring our AI version of The Odyssey to theaters so that people can contrast and compare the two. And it seems like hopefully they'll say, oh, well, you know what? This actually isn't so bad, compared to, it's not a night and day difference. So let's look at a brief clip of The Fall. This is from the theatrical trailer for the film. Again, they said that this will be a 2026 release. As of the last reading that I did, the last research I did, there's no official release date, but this is a brief clip from Odysseus the Fall, the AI version of the Odyssey from Fountain Zero.
Let me go.
No, you don't get to think.
I've killed many men, destroyed many lives.
Yes, face it. Standing.
Cool. Also, we have a second AI version of the Odyssey. Now, this one is a little bit more nebulous, but this was announced on the world's biggest platform by formerly the world's first trillionaire, Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk has devoted, if you were going to translate it into, given the amount of companies that he runs and what his time is worth, Elon Musk seems to have invested tens of millions of dollars worth of his own time into providing social commentary about the Odyssey and talking about the casting. I saw earlier this week that he was boosting on his personal Twitter account conspiracy theories about the rigging of the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, which have been prevalent from people that said the Odyssey was going to fail and now are determined to prove that it did indeed fail, despite all evidence to the contrary, because all of that, of course, is fake and rigged and fraudulent and all that stuff. Anyway, so there was a user on Twitter who sent out a clip of the Odyssey using Grok Imagine, which is AI, Twitter or X's AI tool. And Elon Musk had this to say: before this year ends, Grok Imagine will make a full-length movie of the Odyssey that is historically accurate and true to the art of Homer. And listen, if we have learned anything over the last 15, 20 years or so, it's that when Elon Musk says that something is going to happen, it is definitely going to happen, and it is going to happen on schedule. So he says by the end of the year that there will be a fully Grok-made version of the Odyssey that's historically accurate. I, for one, can't wait to see the historically accurate version of the Cyclops, like what the Cyclops actually looked like, or what the armor that Agamemnon didn't wear because he isn't a real person looks like in the historically accurate version of the Odyssey, an epic poem that itself was not accurate to any version of history that we're aware of. But it's going to be a historically accurate version of the Odyssey, and it is going to be completely generated by Grok Imagine. Now, this is not necessarily a clip of what this final version of the Odyssey will look like, but this is the clip that was originally generated that was quote tweeted by Elon Musk as an example of what Grok Imagine would be able to produce. So this is a dialogue scene, part of a dialogue scene from the Grok Imagine version of the Odyssey, and maybe this will be something like what we eventually get with this full AI version.
Build your raft. Be free.
You mean some other thing. Not my passage. Swear it.
What a schemer you are. By Styx itself. I mean no harm to you.
Riveting. I loved the large hand at the end. That was my favorite part. So anyway, if you didn't like the Odyssey and you think that AI can do better, well, you might have a couple of options to look at by the end of the year. Maybe you'll enjoy them better. Actually, my guess is you probably will, because many people don't like the Odyssey. And listen, I get it. I'm probably poking the bear a little bit too much here, but is this okay? To me, this is the distillation of what a lot of people have problems with AI, which is, here's a problem that doesn't really seem to exist. See, people do seem to be, unless you are on the train that all of the audience reactions are fraudulent, that they're all rigged, all of the scores, the Rotten Tomatoes, the IMDb, that people actually hate the movie. And you also believe that it's not a success because the studio's been buying all the tickets out and people are going to the auditoriums and it's empty, although nobody really seems to be noticing that, except for people that already hate the Odyssey. Many other people have said, no, I was in a full auditorium. Those are holograms. Those are universal generated audience holograms. Those were not real people. Unless you subscribe to those particular theories, it seems to me that the audience reaction to the Odyssey is very good. It's done really good box office on Monday and Tuesday. So it looks like it's going to be continuing some good momentum into this weekend. Maybe it'll drop big, but there have been no indications that it's going to. I'm going to a screening tomorrow night that is completely sold out. I will be poking all of the people in the seats around me to ensure that they're not holograms. If they are indeed holograms, I will report back. I will return the check that Universal sent me to give the movie a good review. I'll void it. And I will report back that, in fact, my screening of the Odyssey was not sold out and it was full of Universal generated holograms. But assuming that they are real people, I will be attending a screening of the Odyssey tomorrow, which is completely sold out. It's sold out in IMAX through the weekend. I looked at regular theaters. They also seem to be doing pretty good business. So it looks positioned to be hopefully to do pretty well, I guess, if you're Christopher Nolan Universal in weekend number 2. We'll see how it holds up against Spider-Man. But this to me is a distillation of AI, which is, here's a problem that doesn't really need to be solved, that the people who are stakeholders in AI, and Elon Musk certainly is, if you own an AI studio, you're certainly a stakeholder in AI, coming to the table and saying, hey, I have a solution to this problem. And people say, well, I don't think that's really a problem that we have. And they'll say, no, it's a problem, and AI is the only way to fix it. And we're going to use AI to fix this problem, whether you agree that it's a problem or not, and whether you want the solution or not. So who knows? Maybe Odysseus the Fall will be the box office sensation of the year. Maybe everyone will look at it and say, these AI movies are way better than spending weeks and months on location and shooting things for real and using digital effects only when you need to, and casting good actors and good parts and, making real things. Maybe they'll say, no, we want AI. In my opinion, I don't think that those clips really compared very favorably, and particularly with the Fountain Zero version with Odysseus the Fall, when they said we want people to go and watch our movie and compare it to Christopher Nolan's. It kind of reminds me of the Tim Robinson "I think you should leave" thing that's been turned into a meme. You sure about that? But maybe they do. Maybe they have full faith that their Odyssey is going to compare well to the one that is in theaters now. But yeah, if you are thirsting for a AI Odyssey, you're going to get your beak wet very soon, because there's apparently a couple on the way, and definitely one. And again, when Elon Musk says something is going to happen, that means it's going to happen. So stay tuned. Multiple AI Odysseys are on the way. Let's go now to, let me make sure my mic hasn't cut out or anything. Let's see. Nope. Looks like it has not. So let's continue on with what we've been talking about, or what we're going to talk about next. Box office. One of my favorite topics here on this channel. And let's talk specifically about the website The Numbers. Now, The Numbers was my go-to site after Box Office Mojo was stripped of most of its functionality following its takeover from Amazon. The Numbers was a far more complete site. It had more information, it updated sooner, and it still does update the weekend totals sooner. I do go to the numbers first because they kind of update in real time. But earlier this year, the numbers went down completely for about a week, and there wasn't a whole lot of information about it. And then it came back up, and it's had a very small portion of its former functionality. It does have weekend box office numbers. You can look up specific movies, but a lot of its data had just completely disappeared. And there was a lot of talk about, well, what happened? Why did they go away? And why did they come back such a lesser version of the previous version? Well, we now have some answers. This is from the personal blog or Substack, I believe, of Stephen Follows, who actually talked to Bruce Nash, who is the founder and CEO of The Numbers. He talked about the reasons why the numbers went down earlier this year, and it turns out that it has to do with AI. It was due to increased AI traffic on the site. These are a few things that Bruce Nash said. He said, quote, "We saw a big increase in crawls as AI training joined the search engine crawlers." Crawling meaning external sources coming in and requesting data. So basically saying like, hey, I'm coming into your website. I'm going to grab this piece of information that somebody wanted, and I'm going to bring that piece to the user without bringing them to your site. I'm going to bring the information from your site to that user. The AI crawlers are generally less well behaved than the search engines, which increase the management tasks for us to keep the site running smoothly. Bruce Nash went on to say, quote, "Around December 2025, we saw another big spike in traffic, which I attribute to agentic AI, a combination of AI agents that scrape sites in response to prompts and people being able to write agents that scrape sites." So basically automated site scraping. And again, scraping is taking the data off a website. You go in, you ask for these pieces of information, you take that data and you take it back to another source. And this is something that I did a little bit of experimentation with. I think I talked about it. It was either on this show or on Charts with Dan, where I said I tried to use AI as a research assistant to basically help me to compile lists that weren't easy to find. Things like the top 10 opening weekends of all time. That's no problem. I know where to go to find that. But at a certain point, I went on Google Gemini and I said, hey, I need you to help me find the 10, biggest openings for this kind of movie on this weekend. And the results were woefully inaccurate. There were movies that were left out. There were movies that were included that shouldn't have been included. And I basically now do all of my research again by hand, just kind of going to these websites myself, scrolling through the list till I find the things that I find. There's a little bit more margin for error, but I think actually less margin for error than I had when I was trying to use AI as a research assistant. And this is the kind of thing that was causing some strain on the numbers, on the website, the numbers. And this was really interesting. They provided some numbers in April 2026, so just a couple months ago. Only 10% of the traffic to the Numbers website was regular human users, people like me every week, where I go to the website, I click on the box office charts, I click on the individual movies. 10% of the traffic were AI agents doing live searches, so people asking AI to retrieve that data. And 80% of the traffic was other automated traffic, so search engines, et cetera, but non-human traffic, people that were not navigating to the site. And this was apparently putting a big strain on the servers for the site because the numbers contained a lot of individual pieces of information. And when you have a bunch of different sources that are asking for that information, trying to bring that information out, it's a volume of traffic that a lot of websites just aren't prepared for because it exceeds human capability by quite a bit. And the servers just couldn't handle that traffic. Now, this is something that was very interesting, too. He included information from Cloudflare. So Cloudflare does a lot of stuff, web security. Cloudflare a lot of times is the person that says, hey, are you a real person? When you are trying to, see something, you have to check a box. Sometimes you have to click buses. I don't like that part. Cloudflare released numbers that said the pages crawled for every one visitor referred back. So basically, how many websites is a search engine or an agent, looking at versus how many people they send back to the actual website. For Google, it was 5-1. So for every 5 pages crawled, they sent one visitor to the website. For OpenAI, it was 1,000-1. And for Anthropic, it was 38,000 crawls for every one visitor referred back to the website, which is why the servers were straining because the requests for data was on the multitude of it was massive. It was much bigger than what they were used to when it was, largely just Google traffic, people searching for information, Google retrieving that information, and then people just going to the website. Now, this is where it gets interesting. It wasn't just, according to Bruce Nash, when the servers collapsed, one of the reasons that the site was having trouble handling the traffic, it wasn't just that there were AI agents that were asking for the information that existed on the site. He said that there was a marked increase for AI agents that were attempting to access the back end of the site. So basically trying to get to the data that's not publicly available. And there was a theory as to why that might be. And it involves something else that is very controversial, and that is Polymarket. So Polymarket, as they do with everything else, takes bets on what the weekend box office or of a movie will be. And the source that they use to settle those bets, meaning the bets become final when the final numbers, so not the estimates that come in on Sunday, but when the final numbers are published on the numbers.com, so the website we're talking about, that is what settles the bet. And that's when the bet basically closes. And so the theory there is that the numbers, the final numbers, and I experience this every Monday, they don't all come in at the same time. They come in throughout the day on Monday. And I'm sure the numbers probably does what I do when I'm preparing charts, which is as I see a new number, I'll plug it into my chart. The numbers probably does the same thing. If a final number comes in for a movie, they'll put it into, their database, but they won't publish that until all of the final numbers come in. So the theory there is that because Polymarket used the final numbers as the final arbiter with the futures markets and the predictions and whatever else you want to call it, that there was an attempt, multiple attempts to access the back end of the numbers, to access some of those final box office numbers before they were made public. Because if you know the final numbers before it's public knowledge, then you can then take advantage of that market. If you know that a number finally came in below $47 million and the bet is it going to open to $48 million or above? If you have access to that information before it's publicly available, well, then you can go in, you can place your bets, and you can make some money. And again, this is not them saying, well, this is what happened. We know that people did this, but they're saying, well, one of the reasons that the site was strained was because we were combating people that were attempting to do this, attempting to access the back end data on our site. And we think that it possibly could have been because they wanted access to those final numbers in order to sort of hack the system and win big on Polymarket or Kalshi or whoever else might use the numbers for data. So this is sort of how all of these things, AI, Polymarket, and those other kind of futures predicting markets, this is how they all kind of coalesce when it comes to the world of entertainment and everything else. As far as the future of the website, Bruce Nash said that they are trying to bring back functionality. They're trying to bring back all of the data that they previously had. But what they are doing, or what they're having to do essentially, is to rebuild the website from the ground up and code everything in such a way that when an AI agent tries to go in and scrape that data or crawl the numbers, instead of the response from the website being, here's that data, the response is, here's how you can license that data. So if you want to automatically pull data from our site, here is a resource for you to pay us to allow you to do that, instead of just allowing infinite amounts of crawling and scraping of data. But they're also trying to make sure that actual human beings that are visiting the website still have access to that information. So as you can imagine, first of all, going back and doing that for the decades that they've been available is a long time. And I'm sure it probably takes a while to code the website in that new way. So that really was useful to me, because it helps me to understand why exactly it's taken so long for the numbers to come back. And it's because they're basically having to start from scratch and combat things that they never in a million years thought that they would have to actually deal with. So I have a lot of sympathy for them. I was a little frustrated just because I didn't know what was happening, but I've got a lot of sympathy for their situation. So if you want to know why the numbers is currently a shadow of what it was, that's why. It was AI. It was attempts to, again, reportedly, allegedly break into the back end to perhaps get insider information for futures markets and all that stuff. Not futures markets. That's actual stock tips, not gambling. But you know what I mean. Prediction markets. So that's what's going on. Really interesting story there, and I was glad I caught it in time to do it on the show this week. A couple more things. First of all, a Hollywood icon that has been closed since COVID is reportedly set to reopen in 2028. I am talking about the Cinerama Dome, which is one of the most iconic, I'd say one of the most iconic movie theaters in the world, and probably the most iconic theater in Los Angeles. It closed down for COVID, along with the ArcLight, which was the theater chain next door. Pacific Theaters, which owned the ArcLight and the Cinerama Dome, went out of business, so it's been closed now for over 6 years. The Cinerama Dome is going to reopen in early 2028. It was bought by Sony, and it is going to operate as part of their Alamo Drafthouse chain. Now, 5 years ago, if you told me that the Alamo Drafthouse was going to buy the Cinerama Dome and the ArcLight, I would have said, that's incredible. Now, I'm a little bit more measured. Now, they have said that the Cinerama Dome is not going to become your typical Alamo Drafthouse. They're not going to put in tables, and they're not going to take food orders. They're going to open the Cinerama Dome, they say, just as it always has been, as a regular movie theater. They will also be operating the ArcLight, which is next door. And who knows? Maybe they'll also decide not to do the dine-in thing. But if they're operating it as an Alamo Drafthouse, I would imagine they would want to convert it to become like the Alamo Drafthouse. That's where I'm a little bit more mixed, because the Alamo Drafthouse has made so many adjustments under Sony's ownership as far as how they do things. The great thing about the ArcLight, and the ArcLight was kind of the go-to for me in Los Angeles for the premium theater experience, because they were very stringent about phones in theaters. They had people that would come in and check. They did what I've said theaters should do. They had ushers. They had people who were dedicated to coming in and checking during a movie. And they were also very responsive if somebody was talking or using their phone. They were known for that. And so, to compromise that with the new policies with the Alamo Drafthouse, whatever, it's what it is. Maybe they'll do something a little bit different, because it is a different kind of theater. But it's objectively good news that the Cinerama Dome is opening. It is a really, really cool theater. It's kind of a one-of-a-kind theater. There were so many movies I saw there the first time. I saw Mad Max Fury Road there, and it was an absolutely mind-blowing experience. It was really the closest you could get to IMAX before IMAX became as common as it is, and now you can find it everywhere. Certainly in Los Angeles. But it's great to hear that the Cinerama Dome is opening again. We'll see how everything else goes with Alamo Drafthouse, but I'll take the lesser of two potential evils here, and let Sony own it and reopen it as it was and always has been, because I think that LA is a better place culturally with the Cinerama Dome open. So that's a good thing. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly. Before I get to your questions, I've done one installment of this. I've been collecting a few, but I wanted to get to some more of my angry comments of the week. Now, as I've said, these are not things that I think are legitimately abusive or that actually make me angry. Those usually go away and nobody ever sees those. These are just comments that kind of made me chuckle, made by some disgruntled fans. Let's not even say fans. Let's say viewers of the channel. So let's look at a few of them. The first one was on my review of Supergirl. It says, "Wow, you look a bit old to review Supergirl. Do you know any younger critics?" The answer is no. I do not. I am the youngest critic I know. There are no critics below 43 years old. And as we all know, Supergirl has an age limit on criticism for when you're too old or too young to review it. It starts at 43, because I'm the youngest movie critic there is. This is another one. This was on my Masters of the Universe review. "Okay, you lost me at Skeletor feeling flat. You really understood nothing about this movie. Such a shame. I've followed since your SourceFed days. I'm out." And this is really sad to hear, because I remember this person from all my days working at SourceFed. The long hours at SourceFed, many, many years. Oh, I still remember what those SourceFed offices look like, and all of my colleagues and coworkers at SourceFed. It's really sad to hear that somebody who was such a devoted fan that they obviously remember every one of my amazing achievements at SourceFed would leave. I never worked at SourceFed. Here is another comment. So I forget which movie this was on. It says, "Please make your reviews as long as possible. The more verbose they are, the more time you're wasting. We're out of here after 40 seconds. 40 seconds into a movie review, it's like, nope, too long." I responded, "If 40 seconds is all you're going to give me, then my style is not for you." And they replied twice. The first one said, "That may be the first thing you've ever said that anyone has ever agreed with." And then they have a follow-up reply. "On the lighter side, I'm only able to give my wife 30 seconds. So consider yourself lucky. Have a great night." And that just makes that's okay. This is funny on multiple reasons. Number one, I'm not going to feel bad if you judge my review after 40 seconds saying that it's too verbose, because that is most definitely a you problem. That's not a me problem. If you are unable to process a movie review in less than 40 seconds, if you require that it gets to the point in less than a minute, your consumption of media is just something, like I said, we're not going to match with each other. But my favorite thing is that last response, because I just want to step into the mentality of somebody like that who would go into YouTube and think that it's a good idea to leave a comment that said, like, you didn't get to the point in under a minute. You suck. I'm out of here. And oh yeah, I'm bad at sex. Like, what? Why? What's the? Okay, like that has nothing. First of all, it has nothing to do with what we were talking about. And secondly, like you said, like, I'm out. Peace. I gave you 40. My wife gets 30. Laters. Like, that's not. I'm sorry for your wife. Yeah, I don't know. Just an odd choice of things to share there on that comment. This was another one. Okay, so I have to do a little bit of this. Reminds me of a lot of the kid in Hot Fuzz when he's in the bar and Simon Pegg comes up to him and says, "When's your birthday?" And he says, "Whatever his birthday." He says, "What year?" And the kid says, "Every year." This reminds me of something like that because this was over the July 4th weekend. And I think I opened my Charts with Dan or one of my videos saying like, "Hey, it's July 4th here in the United States." And of course I got this reply, "It's July 4th this weekend everywhere." Yeah, I know. You know what I mean. It's the US July 4th is different, but it's pedantic, but true. It's not inaccurate. It was July 4th this weekend everywhere. I should have been more specific, saying it's the July 4th holiday. But this one I think is my favorite. So this was on my If I Ran DC video. And the comment just said, "If I were making this channel, I would run it to the ground." I just have to applaud you there. Like, I'm a big Chappelle Show fan. This reminds me of like the Player Haters Ball. That is a plus hater comment. Just like if I ran DC, I'd do this. Yeah. Well, if I ran this channel, I'd run it into the ground. I mean, I can't even be angry at that. That's if you're gonna leave an angry comment, that is like a hater comment. It's a great hater comment. I can't argue with that. It's just good thinking. It's just good thinking. All right, so those are my angry comments of the week. Let's take a look now at some of your super chats. Let's look at some of the questions that have come in. If I have time, I'll also try to go through the chat and see if I can grab other stuff, but I've already got about 30 questions to answer. So let's jump right into it because we've already been here for about half an hour. This is from Rochester Producers 8847. Rest in peace, Sam Neill. He is with the dinosaurs now. Love Jurassic Park, Hunt for Red October, and Event Horizon. Yes, I didn't do a show last week, so I didn't do a segment on Sam Neill. That was such a sad thing to hear. I've actually been thinking about him a lot over the last week because obviously Jurassic Park is a huge influence on me. It's one of the most important memories in my movie DNA. It's hard to explain the power of that movie if you're 10 years old, and to see that and how it shaped what I think about movies and what I love about movies and learning about visual effects and how you make a movie. I mean, it was a crucial element, and Sam Neill was such a crucial part of that movie. And what I was thinking about is, you know, when we did the honest trailer for Jurassic Park way back, I mean, probably now back in 2012, I guess. So about 14 years ago, believe it or not. I remember we credited Sam Neill as the guy from Jurassic Park because to a lot of, especially the younger audience, that's who he was. He was the guy from Jurassic Park. And I was thinking about how I came to appreciate his career so much as I got older. And I started watching movies that maybe didn't appeal to me at 10 years old. And I did know him as the guy from Jurassic Park. When you go back and you watch Hunt for Red October and Event Horizon and In the Mouth of Madness, and so much of the amazing other work that Sam Neill did, I just gained a whole new appreciation for him as an actor. And you realize just how much he was able to do, how many different parts he was able to play, hero parts, villain parts, romance, comedy, drama. He could do all of it. And the other thing I liked about it was that he always seemed like such a no nonsense, but not in a bad way, just a totally game person, always up for a laugh, always up for, he'll tell it to you like it is. He has a sense of humor about himself. He has a sense of humor about his work. He just seemed like such a real person, especially as he got older. He never seemed to be uncomfortable with the fact that he was associated so closely with Jurassic Park. And, of course, he came back a couple of times and did more movies. He just seemed like such just an actual, honest, real person. You didn't feel like you were looking at a persona. And then you look at all of the work that he left behind, not just Jurassic Park, but everything else. It is a real loss. And I was really sad to hear about that. Rest in peace, Sam Neill, because he leaves behind. If you've only seen him in Jurassic Park, just go out there and look up some of his other films, because he was really a great actor, and just seemed like a genuinely delightful, funny person as well. Yanal0611 says, complaining about the Odyssey, Lupita Nyong'o and Elliot Page while simultaneously promoting Citizen Vigilante and now adding in this AI crap. Give me a break, Musk. What a genuine loser. Your words, not mine. Again, for me, it's just, I'm shocked that somebody who has that much to do and is running that many companies spends so much time tweeting about movies. I mean, I do it. I do this for a living. I talk about movies all the time. It's just crazy to me that so much of his time is spent on X, which formerly known as Twitter, and that so much of it is stuff that's like just the stuff. It's like, what? Genuinely, do you not have more important things to do? And I'm not saying that like it's like, I genuinely think you have more important things to do. Like, you're trying to get people to Mars and get cars to drive themselves down the road. Like, that's go. Like, I just don't understand the need to focus on this other stuff. It just kind of boggles my mind. Rochester Producers 8847 says, the poor grifters, slim picking these days to go after the Odyssey like they bet on the prediction markets for it to underperform. Maybe they did. I don't know. I mean, listen, it's never slim pickings for people that I think genuinely, I'm not saying that everyone who dislikes the film is a grifter, but there are people who just kind of go from thing to thing. There will be a new thing in a week or two. This was good for a few months. And, it got a lot of engagement, a lot of clicks, a lot of views, a lot of YouTube, social media, a lot of follows and likes and all that stuff. That's the goal for a lot of folks. And this has kind of run its course. If it had flopped, it would have been another 2 weeks or 3 weeks of clicks and stuff. But now, we'll do the few days where it's all a fraud, and then it'll be the next thing. There's always a next thing. There's always something coming down the road. The Odyssey was it for a while. It's going to be something Disney or it doesn't end. So I wouldn't feel too bad for them because they'll find something else. As Venus 97 says, rest in peace, Kaylee Hoddle and Sir Sam Neill. Yeah, Kaylee Hoddle I heard as well, who played in the new Godzilla movies, Godzilla Kong movies. Tragic, I believe, a car accident. I thought was a really talented young actress, and somebody who, she was deaf, but the characters she played and how she played those characters, it wasn't defined by that. It was an aspect of who that character was. But I remember those films. I thought she was very good, and that was very sad to hear as well. Hufflebug, no audio. Thank you. I was able to pick that up. David B. DeBomb says, I don't know if you watch Big Brother, but did you see Rick Devens and Dee were cast on this season? I don't watch Survivor, but remember you talking about Rick before. Yes. So I did see that Rick Devens and Dee were on the latest version of Big Brother. I've never been a Big Brother person. It's just not really my bag. And even this season, I saw one clip from Big Brother, which is like from the premiere, where they like brought somebody out and they pretended like they had time traveled, and then they knocked the person into a volcano, like a fake volcano. Like there's someone in a dinosaur suit, and she's like, and fell into a volcano. And I was like, what is this show? So I don't think I'll be getting into Big Brothers, but I did see that Rick Devens was cast, and I also see his name coming up. I've seen some people say, well, if Jeff Probst were to retire, who do you think should take over for him? And I've seen Rick Devens' name. I could see it. Calypso the Sea Goddess, congratulations, although it looks like you're a different Calypso than the one that's in the Odyssey. Says, thoughts on the Paramount Warner Brothers merger lawsuits? I almost did a story about that today. I just felt like I've covered a lot of that ground. I think the EU gave them the go-ahead earlier today, which was one obstacle. But if you didn't see the news, there was a temporary restraining order put on the merger in court due to the antitrust or monopoly suits that were brought by several state attorneys general. And basically that just means they have 14 days that here in the United States that the merger can't go forward while there is documentation and stuff being prepared to present the case in court to decide if it needs to go to the court. So it's basically 14 days. You can't do anything because we need to determine if this case is going to go forward so you can present arguments in court. Here's the thing. I think it is anti-competitive, and I do think it's anti-consumer. And a lot of people have said, well, if the Disney-Fox merger was allowed to go ahead, then why shouldn't the Warner Brothers-Paramount merger go ahead? And my answer would be, I don't think the Disney-Fox merger should have gone ahead either. So I guess the question really is, do you think that we should just let this one go ahead too because another bad merger went through, or should we stop a merger that is anti-consumer and monopolistic and say regrettably this other one shouldn't have gone through? Now maybe you don't agree that it's anti-consumer. I personally think that it is. If I were going to lay money down, I think that the merger would still get approved. The question is, how long are these delays? Because remember, I think it's at the end of Q3, a ticking fee starts to apply, because in order to kind of win this back from Netflix, Paramount said if it's not closed by September 30th, then we're going to pay basically a daily fine because the merger's not closed to the shareholders at Warner Brothers, what's currently Warner Brothers Discovery, and that could get into the billions of dollars. So if this merger isn't done because it's tied up in court, I think the more likely scenario is that the investors, the shareholders at Paramount will say, no, wait a minute, this is costing us way too much money. This is dragging on and on top of what we're already taking on. That would be the more likely scenario for me where the merger doesn't go through. But we'll see. It could be that in 2 weeks, when this goes in front of a judge, that they say that it's not going to go, or there could be a settlement. The Paramount and the states could come to some kind of an agreement so that it doesn't go to court. So I think that it is the first step in a potentially painful process for Paramount. But I don't think it's game over for either side at this point. And I think that really the closer we get to September is when the story is really going to be written. Comtar says, Movie Fights asked what Nolan should do next. My answer would have been 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's been decades since we've had a good Jules Verne adaptation. Get those IMAX cameras underwater. What would you say? Well, I mean, that's interesting. I think it would be harder even to do a movie like 20,000 Leagues in that realistic way that Christopher Nolan likes, harder than it even would be to do the Odyssey. Not that everything in the Odyssey was actually real, but a lot of it was able to be shot for real. Whereas underwater, I think it would either be cost prohibitive or you would have to use a lot more effects than I think Nolan wants to do. Nolan has said that this completely exhausted him physically, and I agree. And he said it's going to be 3 or 4 years before his next movie. So I'm going to defer to him, and I'll just say I'm just going to be excited for whatever he chooses to do next. I'll give him a little time to rest and recover. But I never would have picked the Odyssey as something like, ooh, Christopher Nolan should do the Odyssey next. Like, I never would have guessed that. And I ended up really liking the movie. I like that he has said that the Odyssey kind of started a horror thing. He likes doing the sort of more horror related parts of the story. A Chris Nolan horror movie, I'd be on board for that. A Cartoon 49 says, oh, look at that. Perfect question. With Nolan saying he was interested in horror, would you say he would be a good fit to do a Mountain of Madness and or Dante's Inferno adaptation? Yeah. I mean, either one. I don't think you should get too worried about getting trapped in the classics. I'd also be fine with him doing an original story if there's one that he likes. I would advise bringing in on a co-writer, as I've said often about Christopher Nolan's films. But it should be whatever he's excited about, because he shows that he seems incapable of making something he's not passionate about. Dante's Inferno to me would be a little bit too close to the Odyssey, but In the Mouth of Madness, or to a Mountain of Madness, yeah, if he's excited about it, sure. Geek Factor says, hi, Dan. After seeing the trailer views and reactions, I'm starting to think Spider-Man Brand New Day might make more money than Avengers Doomsday. Do you think it's possible, and what message would that send? I mean, we'll see. Apparently, the pre-sales for Doomsday were very good because they went on sale for Infinity Vision theaters only, and still were very, not comparable, but certainly looked like it was a very strong opening, similar to what we saw with Spider-Man Brand New Day. By the way, none of the theaters in my area are obviously Infinity Vision certified because there were no pre-sales for Avengers Doomsday anywhere in my area. So I guess none of our theaters are up to par. What would it say? I don't know if it would. I wouldn't draw any huge conclusions. It just would depend on if Spider-Man Brand New Day does $400 million and Avengers Doomsday does $375 million domestically, then I'm not going to say oh, well, Avengers is in trouble. It just kind of depends on what's surrounding it. What did the movie do internationally? If Avengers Doomsday still makes money, if it's a hit but not as big as Spider-Man, I don't think that's such a huge thing, because Spider-Man is Marvel's most popular brand. even more than the Avengers, I would say. So I wouldn't draw conclusions from it unless Doomsday really was a financial disappointment. I saw that Doomsday trailer. It was, to me, it was like, okay, it was literally just like, here's all the people in the movie. I'm like, all right, well, I knew there were a lot of people in the movie. I'm more interested in like, what is it about? And I know you're not going to put that all in a trailer. But yeah, to me, it was just a showcase of just like, okay, that's a lot of people. Hope the story's good. Cartoon 49 says, how would you feel about a Tom Cruise, Christopher Nolan team up? I mean, I think that'd be great. That's probably the most cinema passionate actor and the most cinema passionate director working right now. But Christopher Nolan likes to produce his films or likes to have control with Emma Thomas producing his films. And Tom Cruise likes control. So I think you would have to work out some kind of a power, I wouldn't want a situation where they both kind of feel like they're the alpha on the set. They call the shots. If it's better for Tom Cruise to do his things, and I think he does a lot also to advance cinema, then I think they just have to work out how that's going to work and who's in charge. But I would love to see it. I'm sure you probably saw the story too, but there's a great one about Tom Cruise going to an AMC to see the Odyssey. I'm sure it was all prearranged and pre-set up, and he had all of the employees watch it with him because he's like, oh, you haven't seen it? You haven't seen it? Let's go. And they went in and watched it together, and Tom Cruise was just saying like, oh, that's so effing sick, like during the whole movie. Like, here's the thing about Tom Cruise. Say what you will, and a lot of people have said a lot of things, and I think a lot of them are deserved. But I don't think it's an act. I think the guy genuinely not only loves movies and loves the theatrical experience, but if you hear him talk about it, lenses and how movies are shot, he knows the craft. He knows the art. He knows how movies are made. He knows how he wants movies, how they should be made. He's not a poser. I mean, the guy knows his stuff. He's genuinely passionate about it, and I love it. I think there are more people in Hollywood that should be advocates like he is. He doesn't just go out and support his movies. He goes out and supports other people's movies too. I think that's great. If you could just separate that from all the other stuff, then it'd be even better. Owen Cummings says, what are your thoughts on Sam Mendes's plan for the 4 Beatles movies releasing on the same day? Follow up, do you have a favorite Beatle? I think I got a question on Patreon about this. I think that it's an interesting plan. I don't necessarily know if it's the smartest plan. If anything, I would do them maybe one a month or one every quarter. To do them all the same day, I think you're running into capacity issues. I think you're running into just audience exhaustion issues, maybe ones where they're going to pick 2 of the 4 or 3 of the 4. It's interesting to say you did it, but I just don't know if it's the soundest plan if you're looking for all of the movies to succeed. We'll see. If they're all 4 great, sure, but like how many people are going to use up a week's worth of AMC reservations just to see the Beatles movies? And how many people are going to want to, if they don't have AMC A-list or something, are going to pay admissions to see 4 movies all at the same time? I'm a little skeptical about that. Do I have a favorite Beatle? I mean, obviously, or maybe not so obviously, they were a little before my time. I love music. I like listening to music, but I'm not able to appreciate music on a level that some people are. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people that appreciate music in the same way that I appreciate movies, where like there's a lot of people who say like, oh, I love watching movies, but they don't necessarily look at it the same way that I do or analyze it as deeply as I do. And I'm not saying that as a positive or negative thing. So I think that there are people that appreciate music more than I do that could probably go more into why this Beatle or that Beatle is their favorite. I don't actually have a favorite Beatle. I think that they were extremely influential. I like listening to their music. I like each of their works on their own as well. But no, I don't think I have a favorite Beatle. I think they were all pretty talented guys. Breaking news, Beatles talented. Film Sharp 42 says, TV show as a kid that you'd love to see as a movie. Jeez. I feel like almost all of them have already been made into movies. I mean, my childhood has pretty much been strip mined at this point for movie reboots. There's always one that I think about, and this is something else I think I talked about on Patreon, but I don't remember the context. But this to me is something that it's what you should do when you're making a movie adaptation. There was a short-lived NBC series called The Highwayman. It was kind of a knockoff Mad Max. And it just was a guy driving around in the post-apocalypse with a semi-truck. And I think that it seemed like to me it had some real potential maybe for a movie. And it's not something that's just been mined to death. So I'll say The Highwayman, which is the show that probably nobody remembers. but that I think you could maybe adapt something good out of that, because otherwise I just think that all the other shows, cartoons, they've all been done, it seems like. Z Strike 026 says, I hope Avatar Aang will be the next K-pop Demon Hunters where it eventually gets a theatrical release. Well, I mean, I believe it is getting a very small release this weekend. I think just in LA and New York, and then it streams on Paramount Plus on Saturday. That was what it was going to do, though. That's the thing is I would say maybe, except that Paramount was going to put it out in the theaters and then they decided not to. So it would be weird to me if they went back and said, okay, now we're going to put it in theaters again after, like if they wanted to put it in theaters, they just would have kept it as a theatrical release. Plus the fact that it leaked adds a whole other element to it. So I don't see that happening other than the very small release, which I believe is to qualify it for the Academy Awards that's happening this week. RS Roca 1984 says, have you heard of the movie Dark Horse starring Jim Caviezel? The movie will probably not be very good, but the story around its making is crazy. It is being in the center of a huge corruption scandal in Brazil. I have not heard of the movie Dark Horse starring Jim Caviezel, so I'll have to look into it. I love movies with an interesting making of story. Tully Quinn says, what exactly do distributors do? I would have thought that the digital era would make distributing media easy, allowing for anyone to see any film anywhere. Well, I mean, a lot of studios do their own distribution. If you're doing streaming only, then yes, there's not much distribution to do because it's just going to a streaming service. But if you're arranging getting it to theaters and booking theaters and stuff like that, if you're doing anything with movie theaters, then that's really what your distributor is going to handle. It's making sure that you're getting the movie into the right places properly. If it's not a major Disney release, for example, if you are trying to let's say you have an indie film that's been acquired and you're distributing that indie film, well, a lot of that involves working with different theaters, getting it in as many theaters as possible, or looking at the strategy. What's the strategy going to be on this movie? Are we going to open it on 100 screens, 500 screens? Are we going to open it on 10 screens and then expand it to 1,000? That to me is the more difficult job for distributors. And that to me is where I think that they right now serve their biggest function. But you're right. If it's just streaming, then a distributor doesn't have the same workload that they used to. But I think especially in the world of indie film, distributors are still crucial to making sure that those movies get in theaters. And it's a lot of work, especially for an independent film. User 225CCC says, what would you do if you were Bear from Obsession? Ooh. What would I do? I mean, hopefully I would never make the wish to begin with. Just because, I mean, let's say I naively made it, thinking that it would never work, and then it did work. I would certainly hope that I would take much more accountability for it than Bear did. There's a very limited amount of time in that movie where you can give him a benefit of the doubt as far as realizing that something is wrong. And then at a certain point, I think he becomes an absolute, to me, villain. Just no real redeeming factor. So I would, if I were in that situation, my hope would be that as soon as it became evident that there was something very wrong, and it really was almost immediately, I would say, hey, this is not something let's back off here. And then if she then was following me in the way that they do in the movie, I would hope that I would deal with that differently and say, like, okay, we got to figure this out here, because this whole relationship thing is off the table. There's obviously something deeper happening here. AIO fan BLK says, you were pretty meh on Star Trek Lower Decks season 1. Other Trekkies say it got better as it went along. Did you watch more, or did your opinion change? I didn't. I hear the same thing, that I should have. I did not watch more of Lower Decks, but I should. It's just so hard, especially if I fall behind on a show. It's so hard to catch up because I've got a lot of other stuff going on. I'm preparing now for my Halloween video. Every Halloween I do a big ranking video, and it involves watching a lot of movies, and I think I'm taking on my biggest one yet. So I'm literally watching movies now in July for my Halloween video in October, over 3 months from now. That's just how big the project is. So that's going to be taking up a lot of my time for a while. Dylan Fitzsimmons, 2278 says, thoughts on Seth Rogen, both in terms of talent and personality. I've always been a fan of Seth Rogen. I think he's funny. I like his brand of comedy. I've liked him in most of the comedies I've seen him in. I really like The Studio. I think it's a really, really good show. It can become a little one note. I agree. Like, like just the stoner stuff all over and over and over again. I think he can fall into a type, but I also think some of that is just his personality. And The Invite, I thought, was a great way to use Seth Rogen's natural personality and natural strengths to play a character that's different than we've seen him play in other movies. And I thought he was really good in that movie. On a personal note, he came in once to do movie fights, kind of at the height of movie fights success, when we could get Seth Rogen to come into the studio and do movie fights. And he was delightful. He was a really nice guy, funny, had that sort of like, wasn't afraid to kind of, I think he made fun of the set. He was like, I've never seen this. This is the nerdiest show and the most sports looking set in the world. But it wasn't like he was being mean. It's like he kind of get some zingers, get a roast joke in. So I'm a fan of Seth Rogen, except for when it just seems like they're sort of being lazy with how they're writing his characters. And the limited personal interaction I had with him when he came into movie fights was that he was a really nice guy. AIO fan BLK says, any more thoughts on Spider Noir? I thought it was good, thoroughly enjoyable, and any drawbacks were lessened by Nick Cage's performance. A particularly good Nick Cage meme moment in the last episode. I started Spider Noir, and it wasn't that I didn't like it. I just kind of got sidetracked because summer is so crazy for me and never finished it. But I liked what I saw, and I'll probably finish it at some point. Adeline Hudson says, who is the best director currently working who is not a household name in the U.S.? For me, it's Hirokazu Koreeda or Park Chan-wook. It's hard for me to gauge like who is a household name in the U.S. and who isn't. Like for me, I know that in the award circles, but like Corley Forja is probably a household name for people that have seen The Substance and saw Revenge, I think. And but I doubt that she is a household name. And both of those movies specifically, I think, were great. So that would be for me. I think I can't wait to see what she does next. So that would be my answer, but it's hard for me to gauge what's a household name and what's not. Dylan Fitzsimons 2278 says, favorite fried chicken sandwich? Well, that's a great question. Up until a couple years ago, I would say Wendy's spicy chicken easily, but there's been a huge quality downgrade at Wendy's. I actually rarely go there anymore because the food got more expensive and way worse. And I used to love the spicy chicken sandwich at Wendy's, but they like shrank it down. And sometimes it was like a hockey puck. It was like fried. So I actually have an opening currently for favorite fried chicken sandwich. I try not to eat fried chicken sandwiches a whole lot. I don't always succeed, but so I need to make another round because it was so subtle with Wendy's and for so long. I need to go try Popeyes and some other ones again. But yeah, my favorite got replaced. Dylan Fitzsimons 2278 says, I know this is a long time now, but how was your experience doing your former colleague Nick Mundy's podcast, Team Tiger Awesome? I've got to be 100% honest with you. I vaguely remember that I did that. I mean, this has probably been 7 or 8 years ago now. I feel bad. I have no real memory of doing it. I think I remember going and having a good time, but I honestly don't. I feel it sounds terrible because I know that people love that show. I have no functional memory of what it was like doing it other than it being an enjoyable experience. So I'm sorry I can't add more insight, but as the years go on, it gets harder and harder to remember stuff. Sometimes people will remind me of stuff like, oh, you remember on movie fights when so-and-so did this? And I'm like, no. And they're like, oh yeah, no, you said this and that person. And I'll go, oh yeah, that's right. That did happen. But time and age really do a number on your memory here. David B. DeBomb says, happy 22 months. Any new badges for the 2-year mark? Well, thank you for being a member for 22 months. It's crazy. I can't believe that I'm almost at the 2-year mark for membership. No, but I appreciate the update or the reminder, and I may have to do that. I may have to make a badge for 2 years because anyone who's been a member for 2 years deserves their own badge. So let me look into that. Brenton C says, recent trend in biopics is having the real living person or their estate heavily involved in production. Does this help or hurt the film's quality? Are you more or less interested in seeing it? Well, I guess it depends on the biopic, depends on the estate. If the movie is devoted to delivering a true, honest accounting of that person's life, then I think having the estate involved can be a positive because you can have access to materials, to research if you're actors. to personal journals and insights and people that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. So I think if there's a commitment to being honest and not even that the one not necessarily that some are lying, but they sort of a lie of omission where you leave out some of the more controversial things or unsavory things. I think if you have a commitment to being honest about that person, then it can be a good thing. Walk the line. I think I'm pretty sure the Johnny Cash estate, was he still, actually he may still have been living or he had just passed away, but I think that there was cooperation there, and I thought that it was a pretty unvarnished look at his life. I think where you get into some difficulty is when there seems to be an agenda at play. For example, Bohemian Rhapsody. I didn't hate the film as much as a lot of people did, but it was pretty clear that it was a sanitized version of Freddie Mercury's life. And a lot of that was because the other band members were involved and they had their say on what the movie should include and what it shouldn't include. And what I think the result is that you don't get a true accounting of of the reality of that person. I'm not saying that every movie has to be a smear job, but I think that you should be honest to who that person was. And I think that when you have an estate involved or the people themselves directly involved, then it can get a little dicey. Now, Rocket Man for me was one that I thought, Elton John, I believe, was involved with that movie, and I thought that it played it pretty even. But that's not every movie. I mean, the discussion was certainly prevalent with Michael. I think the fact that there was some legal troubles that necessitated the omission of a lot of the controversy starting in the 90s sort of allowed that movie to sidestep how it was going to deal with that. We'll see with the sequel, if it gets made, how they do decide to deal with that. But I think that it can be good or bad, and it depends on what is the commitment to telling the truth and to being honest and accurate. If you're dealing with a musician, though, the tough thing is that you almost have to have the estate involved because of music rights. If you don't get the rights to the music, it's tough to make a music biopic, because then, what are you doing? Geek Factor says, there's a reviewer out there who was big mad at the Odyssey before it came out, who basically admitted that she watched the movie online before reviewing it and hated it. Thoughts? Not surprising. I mean, first of all, watching the movie online, that means pirated. It doesn't mean like, oh, I watched it on a streaming service. It means you watched a pirated copy, which is going to be vastly inferior to a regular movie, much less one that's playing in IMAX that benefits from being on a big screen. And secondly, of course, there are a lot of people who, as I've said for a few months now, a large driver of their audience has been the Odyssey's going to suck. It's woke. It's whatever. The casting, you can't come out and then say, oh, it was amazing. Now, there have been a few. There was one review in particular I saw from somebody who I thought might hate the movie. I'm like, okay, well, it looks like they're shooting it pretty straight. That's fine. But like, if you're getting millions of views on videos for weeks saying that the Odyssey's going to suck, it doesn't surprise me that you went to see it and you're like, I was right. Everything I thought about it going into it, I was right. I was right about everything. Yeah, of course. Because to admit that you weren't right, well, then what does that say about what you spent the last weeks or months of your time doing? It would be basically admitting I didn't know what I was talking about, and everything that I've been saying about this movie was inaccurate. So I'm not even saying that they liked it and they're lying about it. I'm saying if you go in knowing that your brand is hating the Odyssey for these however many weeks or months, then yeah, of course you're going to hate it. And then to add to that you don't even go see it in a theater, that you see a crappy, pirated version, probably a cam leak of the movie. Yeah, of course you're going to hate it even more. But I think that they could have seen it in probably the best 70 millimeter IMAX movie in the world and still hated it, because they walked in saying, I'm going to hate this. 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 And I'm going to hate this. Well, if you've already decided that you're going to hate these things about the movie, then of course you're not going to like it, because you made up your mind already. That's not film criticism. If you're a reviewer if you call yourself a reviewer or critic and you're reviewing the Odyssey, and you've already spent months trashing the Odyssey, and you didn't go see it in a theater, and you watched it online, you're not a critic. You are somebody who has made their brand as hating the Odyssey. Because a critic, I think, the one qualification to being a critic, I'm not saying degrees, academics, a YouTube channel, anything. The one qualification to being an actual critic, somebody who is really in it to critique and to provide and share their opinion on art, movies, whatever, is that you walk into it with an open mind, unbiased opinion walking in, biased, obviously, because you have a subjective opinion walking out. If you walk in with your mind made up, you're not a critic. You're not, because you didn't go in saying, I'm going to give this movie a chance. You're a commentator. There's a difference. A critic is somebody who gives someone a shot to either impress them or not impress them. Otherwise, you're doing something else. Dylan Fitzsimons, 2278, said, thoughts on The Emperor's New Groove? It came out when I was, I think, a senior in high school, so I don't have the attachment to it that a lot of other people did. I think I've seen it once or twice, but I didn't dislike it, but I'm not like super cronk like a lot of other people are, because I was a little aged out by the time that movie came out. Comtar says, thoughts on Neil Blomkamp going to the dark side with his new AI film? Loved him as a director, but this decision has really let me down on him. I've heard a little bit about it. It's him, Steven Soderbergh. There's a lot of directors who have decided to embrace the technology. It's what it is. Am I gonna sit here and say they're terrible people or terrible artists for saying I want to try this new technology? No, but I just don't think that it necessarily takes into account all of the potential ramifications if their decision to do it and their legitimization of the technology by using it, given their former prestige and the projects they've done. I don't think they're fully thinking about the ramifications if that becomes standard, because I think ultimately it's destructive both to the industry and potentially to the art form if everything got taken over with AI. So I understand if you say, I want to explore this technology, but I just think that I think there's a lot more thought that needs to go into it. Z-Strike 026 says, Yelena versus Mystique, I'm seated. I mean, sure. I mean, that looks cool, but like, for me, it's like the context of it. Like it's got to be something that makes it better than just a cool YouTube clip. If it's not, there's nothing else around it, then, we'll see. Samuel Blachon says, the lack of IMAX 70 millimeter is a shame. Only 4 in Europe. I mean, there's not a whole lot in the United States either. There's a handful, and in major cities, there's no IMAX 70 millimeter in my state. I think the closest is Dallas, which is 5 hours away. And the closest to that one, I couldn't even tell you. So there are more IMAX 70 millimeters here in the United States, but not many. It is not a format that very many people, even here in the US, especially given our geographical separation, have access to. But it's a great way to see the movie, but it's not the only way to see the movie. It's not like, if the only IMAX you could see was 70 millimeter, you can still see it in IMAX, which I think still gets the intention across. Hello, Mr. Jamwa says, what was your first IMAX movie viewing experience? Well, okay, so I'm old, and I was around when IMAX was around as a science, like it was at museums and stuff, like aerospace centers. So I used to see things in IMAX and OmniMax, which was like IMAX, but OmniMax was the big dome that kind of went around you a little bit more. I saw all kinds of educational movies, the Blue Angels. There was one on Hollywood Special Effects. There was one on the Alamo when I go to San Antonio. And because of the restrictions of shooting, within the IMAX format at that time, those movies were only like 25, 30 minutes long. But I saw so many of those. There was an IMAX actually at the Aerospace Center here in Arkansas, and I saw a lot of film. We'd go on field trips. I'd see stuff there. The first movie I saw, non-IMAX movie, that I saw on an IMAX screen was Batman Forever, because again, I think I was visiting San Antonio. I was on vacation with my mom, and the IMAX said, we're going to project Batman Forever onto the IMAX screen. So obviously Batman Forever wasn't shot on IMAX film, but they had a print that you could show in IMAX. So the first Hollywood film I saw in IMAX was Batman Forever. And it blew my mind that it could be that big. I mean, it was like the most crazy experience of my life. And probably the first movie that I saw, I mean, like, was The Dark Knight the first? That was the first movie I remember that like it was filmed for the IMAX screen. That's the first one I can remember. So that was the first one I saw that was like, you have to go see it because it was made in the IMAX format, partially at that time. Miriana 11 says, I know your watch list is endless, but Blue Film flew under almost everyone's radar. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I've heard of Blue Film, but I haven't seen it. So that goes on the list. Henry Robbins 625 says, have you ever been to the Hollywood Theater in Portland, Oregon? Just celebrated their 100th anniversary birthday. Highly recommend if you ever visit the city. I've only had the fortune of visiting Portland one time. and it was for a work trip. I was the early days when I was a freelance editor, and I was doing Gen Air product promotional videos. I was editing Gen Air promotional videos, and the company I was working for, there was a cooking exhibition or something in Portland, and I went there and they would go shoot the footage and then I would edit it at night. So I had a little bit of time to go around Portland and to see the city during the day while they were all out at shooting the footage, but I didn't really have time to do anything like go to a movie. So I've not been, but I'd love to see that theater. And I'd honestly love to go to Portland again because it was a really nice city. Henry Robbins 625 also says, my wife also wanted me to let you know that I got her into watching your videos. She loves your wholesomeness and great vibes. Keep doing what you do. Well, thank you, Henry. Thank you for getting your wife into watching my videos. I appreciate that. And any pair of eyeballs, I'll take any number of eyeballs out there of people that want to watch. So much appreciated. I try to be wholesome. Sometimes I fail. The vibes, I do my best. But thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you watching, and your wife as well. Clay7729 says, hey, Dan, quick question. Any update on the next podcast with you, Spencer, and Joe? I mean, yeah, we're three tough guys to wrangle. I text Spencer now and again. Spencer put in a top-notch Ken Knapsack movie fights inside joke in the Troy Honest trailer about Brad Pitt, and I texted Spencer about that last week, and we texted back and forth a little bit. It's just tough to get the three of us together. But I have to take the lead. So I've got to get my act together soon, hopefully, is what I'll say. Damian Fenton says, hi, Dan. Any thoughts on potential sale of Letterboxd? I mean, it was inevitable. I think it's possible that they sell and it stays the same thing it always has been. But what I love about Letterboxd is that indie sensibility. And I know even that has gone away a little bit over the years. But if it just becomes another corporate tool to sell movies, then I think it loses a lot of its magic. So I would prefer, if Letterboxd gets sold, that it's not to a studio or to an entertainment company or private equity. I'd prefer it's to a buyer who's committed to keeping what's special about it, because it seems like in the cinephile world, if things like Alamo Drafthouse and things that are special to people keep getting bought and then stripped of what made them special in the first place. Any Whoosies says, no question here. Just wanted to say I really like your If I Ran DC Studios video and show some support. As a DC fan, I live to suffer. Well, I hope not. The Clayface trailer looked all right. I saw that today. Hopefully that's a good movie. I do feel bad, though, because DC fans have not been eating as well as Marvel fans have. Sometimes better, little fits and bursts here. But I would love, and that's the thing, I've always said, I would love a thriving DC universe, whether it's interconnected or not, because those are some great heroes, and it deserves to be on the same level as a Marvel or an MCU. How have you been? BEN, nice one, says, a reminder that Grok Imagine can and has made child corn. Okay, well, that is a reminder there. Something to think about. Hawker Walks 5219. I know what that means, by the way. We're just going to move on quickly. The point's been made. Hawker Walks 5219 says, just saw A Clockwork Orange for the first time and didn't quite get the hype. Love Kubrick's directing, but his writing doesn't connect with me as strongly. Well, I mean, I think that is something. Kubrick in a lot of ways is kind of like the Nolan of his time, where he was acknowledged as a phenomenal filmmaker technically, but some people said that the writing might have left him a little bit cold. And I think that that's something, that criticism that someone has, many have had for Christopher Nolan, including myself. I also think the problem with movies like A Clockwork Orange is that they were so groundbreaking at the time, and they've cultivated this aura over the decades that when seen through a modern sensibility, it can be a bit of a letdown, because you're so removed from the groundbreaking nature of the film when it came out. And that's partly what that aura and that reputation has been built on. I think it's a really good movie, but it's not, I wouldn't list it as one of my favorite films. I think it's an incredibly well-made movie, but you just have to kind of keep in mind that at the time it was so many degrees above what a lot of people had seen in a movie before. And that is partially what that reputation is built on. That's why I think the movies that were made decades ago that still hold up as well are even fewer and far between, because it's so hard to make something that captures the zeitgeist when you release it and still is able to do that 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 years later. It's incredibly rare. Snoopy Kendall says, went to see The Invite on Friday and I was the only person in the theater. Does that happen to you ever? Love the movie. Thanks for the recommendation. Well, I'm glad you acted on that recommendation because I think it's a really good movie. Yeah, it happens to me from time to time. I live away from a hub of Hollywood activity. So there are times where, especially a smaller movie, an independent movie, if I go see it, especially on a Thursday, like the first day it's out, there are times when I've been the only person in the theater, or more often one of maybe 5 or 6 people in the theater. But yeah, I would imagine with the invite, especially a couple weeks after it came out, that might happen. But that's what, honestly, my favorite thing I love to hear is when I recommend a movie like I did with the invite. And I started recommending it way back in January when I saw it at Sundance. My favorite thing to hear is always when somebody says, I took a recommendation of yours and I went to see a movie and I really liked it. That's what I'm in the game for. That's what I want people to do. And that's what I hope for when I recommend a movie, especially a movie like The Invite or Leviticus or a smaller film like that. Is I love it when somebody says that they went to see it because I liked it, because it's like, oh, great, come join the club. I'm glad I could get you. It's like we're all part of the same club now. So that's great. Firo Hero says, do you think the World Cup has had an impact on movie box office numbers recently? Yeah, probably. I mean, it's hard to prove a negative as far as you can't prove how many people didn't show up. But I think that international numbers specifically were probably impacted by the World Cup. I mean, Sunday, I think just here in the United States across Fox, Telemundo, and Peacock, the World Cup final drew 60 million viewers on Sunday, just here in the United States. It was the most watched soccer/football game by far. I think equal to, I think it bested every NFL game last year except for 2. And the NFL is the most watched anything in the United States right now. So yeah, I think it definitely did have an impact on box office numbers recently, because there were people that were watching on the weekends and during the week. But it's hard to say what that impact could have been, because there's no way to prove how many people were going to go to a movie and didn't go. But we'll see what the international box office looks like in the next several weeks, and see if the numbers look like they're trending higher, or if the share is bigger for movies internationally than we've seen. But given that, still, the Odyssey did great this past weekend. Given that one of its 3 opening days was the day of the World Cup final, it still did incredibly well. So it obviously didn't have a ruinous impact on international numbers or domestic numbers. Phaser Blaster 9310 says, do you think with Sony's announcement of discontinuing physical games, it will eventually hit physical media, i.e. movies? Sadly, yes. I do think that there are going to be studios that just stop producing all physical media, and it's going to piss people off. But obviously Sony doesn't care, because the whole physical game thing pissed people off, and they knew it was gonna, and they don't care. That's how they want to do things. Yes, I do, but I don't think that physical media will ever go away entirely. And I do still think that studios will license some of their films out to specialty labels like Criterion or Shout or Arrow to do like special editions for big movies. So I don't think that all Sony movies would go away altogether, but I do think we will see fewer movies on physical media. Calypso the Sea Goddess says, Days of Thunder 2 just got confirmed to be happening, with Tom Cruise set to return and Jonathan Levine in talks to direct. Thoughts? I've heard about Days of Thunder 2 for a while. Sure. I mean, I think that F1 kind of takes a little bit of the thunder out of the sails there, because we have had thunder out of the sails. Kind of takes a little bit of the wind out of their sails. Days of Thunder, wind out of the sails, because we have had the big IMAX racing movie. But Tom Cruise, it's going to be big. It's going to be IMAX. It's going to be immersive. NASCAR, I think, is different to F1 as far as the fan base, especially here in the United States. So I think it could potentially do a lot of business, but is it going to be able to traffic on the name Days of Thunder in the way that, let's say, Top Gun Maverick did? Not necessarily, but with Tom Cruise involved, it's going to be hyped as this massive IMAX theatrical experience. Mark Trill 9156 says, what's your idea of ethical AI use in the screenwriting process? Well, that is a very difficult question to answer. And the thing is, every screenwriter's ethics are different. I think the only code of ethics that I think is overwhelming is that other people's work should not be used to train an AI that you are using to write your screenplay that you are putting your name on. So if you're putting your name on a screenplay, you should not be using AI that's trained on the work that other people did, because then it's not your work that you're drawing from. Apart from that, I think it just comes down to what every screenwriter wants to do. If they want to use AI as a thought starter, or an outline or whatever. Again, if it's not, it's hard to say that it wouldn't be, but if it's not trained on other people's work, if that's what you choose to do, that's fine. Now, I don't agree with writing an entire screenplay with AI. And I know there's a lot of screenwriters that say that they consider any use of AI to be a violation of the creative process, and they're not wrong. Some people want to use it to help them, get off the starting block. That's fine too. I don't necessarily know if that'd be a choice that I'd make. I think the big thing there is infringing on the rights of others. That's where I draw a line, where I don't think there's any debate or discussion that can be had. Everything else, I think, comes down to what does every screenwriter choose to do, and that's kind of up to them. Owen Ron 2157 says Dune 3 box office outlook with Doomsday same day. Factor Odyssey's success with similar audience. I think we're so far out from that. Dune's going to have all of the premium screens. Doomsday is going to have all of the Infinity Vision and a lot of the other screens. Here's the thing, and I know I'm going to be talking about this on Charts with Dan when it comes out. That window, the opening weekend box office, is going to be far less significant for Dune Part 3 and for Avengers Doomsday, because it's going to be opening going into the Christmas holiday. So it's not like summer where you've got 3 more movies coming down the pike, of the same size in the next month. These movies are going to open, and they're probably going to open well, and then they're going to play out over the entire holiday season. So we're talking about probably 3 weeks of play over Christmas and going into New Year's. You do have other movies like Jumanji coming out at the same time. I don't think that's direct competition. I don't think that Werewolf is direct competition to Avengers Doomsday and Dune Part 3. But I think that reviews are going to have a lot to do with it. And I think it's also we're going to have to be a little patient, because a lot of it's going to be not just how did they open or how did they even do in the first week, how did they do in that post-Christmas window, which is so lucrative. December 25th to New Year's Eve is an incredibly lucrative window. So I think that there are a lot of X factors that we just don't know yet, including what the reaction to both movies is going to be. But the thing that I'm going to start stressing, and that I know I'm going to stress going into the rest of the box office season, is that it's not just going to be about opening 3-day weekend. There's going to be so much more to the story than that. And it's going to be interesting for me, because I love tracking box office numbers. I'm excited to see what happens. Kay Stepko says, I'm up to the 1990s in Michael Schulman's book, Oscar Wars, A History of Hollywood in Gold, Sweat, and Tears. Have you read it? I think I have. I'm a nerd, so I read a lot of different books, but I believe that I have read Oscar Wars, and it is a fascinating book as far as the history of the Oscars and different races and campaigns and rivalries and everything like that. So yes, I think I have read that book, and it is a great, great book. Nick Cage 6375 says AMC's headquarters is in my hometown, but there's no IMAX 70 millimeter theater in my area. Yeah. Well, part of it is that AMC might not necessarily be in charge of that. A lot of IMAX theaters are at AMC theater chains, but IMAX regulates their own theaters. So they work with a lot of different chains. The one I'm going to on Thursday isn't at an AMC. It's at a different, smaller theater chain. The one in Dallas, the 70 millimeter IMAX, is a Cinemark theater. So it's not, I don't think the AMC has a whole lot of call over where IMAX puts 70 millimeter theaters. They just have call over who they work with and what they the different deals that they have specifically with that theater at their chain in that city. Other than that, I think IMAX probably has a lot more control. Sakaki Chrono says, hi, Dan. How often do you prepare your charts in advance? For example, for Brand New Day, did you start researching the moment it was announced, or did you start work on the charts at the beginning of July instead? Happy Wednesday. That's a great question. It depends. So, for example, I knew that it was going to be a very chart-heavy week last week with the Odyssey. And when the very first numbers came in, initially the numbers came in and they said, we think the Odyssey, this is like Thursday night, we think the Odyssey is going to open at $110 million, Thursday night, Friday morning, something like that. I did go ahead and I started to update the Christopher Nolan chart, the Matt Damon chart, the biggest opening weekends of the year, the biggest R-rated openings of all time. I started researching that. And I would slot in like, okay, well, right now it says the Odyssey is going to be $110 million. That's going to put it at either number 3 or 4 on this chart, or it'll definitely be at number 1 on this chart. So even if I have to change it, position it maybe one spot this way or that way, if I have an idea of where a movie is going to open, then I will start to go ahead and update that so that when it comes Sunday, which is where I do a lot of my work, and then Monday, where I do the finishing work, and when I film the show, I don't have to start from scratch and design 20 different charts, all at the same time, which would be hours and hours and hours of work. I try to spread that work out over several different days. So it's just sort of movie dependent. Spider-Man Brand New Day, I kind of know, or at least it seems like it's going to open in a pretty high range. So yeah, I've already started gathering what are the top opening July releases of all time. Let's get the Spider-Man all-time charts ready to go, even if it's just loading those charts up to be edited when the movie comes out. Because I know, just based off pre-sales, that it's going to be up in that range. Let's get the Marvel tracker ready to go, ready to edit. Then when the first numbers come in, I'll do a basic update. When the final numbers come in, I'll do the final update. And then I'll do the show. So I would say, for some movies, maybe I'll start prepping as in pulling material a week ahead of time. If we know how they're going to do, then I'll start updating on Friday, going into Saturday. And then other stuff I can't update until, Sunday or Monday, which would be the actuals. If I'm doing actuals, per theater average, stuff that we don't know till the final numbers come in. And then with streaming, for example, Netflix numbers, Charts with Dan came out yesterday. I pulled the new Netflix numbers yesterday afternoon. Nielsen, I pull on Thursday and try to get that done. So charts is something I'm working on usually throughout the week. And it's just kind of dependent on what information do I have at any given moment. S Hunt, great question. S Hunt 1990 says, have you watched any of the re-release Schmodown matches? Any fun memories from those early matches? So the Schmodown, I know that Christian has changed the strategy and changed the channels a few times. So I never know if when they're pulled or when they're getting re-released. So I haven't watched any of the re-released ones. I have so many fun memories from those early matches. At that time it was so much more just about going and having fun. Before the live events got added and before it became kind of more of a game about studying, and I still enjoyed playing it, but then it was just kind of loosey-goosey, go hang out with your friends, spend an afternoon or sometimes a full Saturday with your friends. So, is there one memory specifically that I have? I just remember Mark Ellis and I backstage at one point. He was dressed as Santa Claus, and I was dressed in a weird, whatever wrestling at that time, or had sunglasses on, and we just looked at each other like, this is our life. What have we chosen to do with our life? But that's really what I remember more than anything, was especially when they would start doing batch shooting on Saturdays and shooting a bunch of matches. I just got to go hang out with friends all day and watch them play and root them on and cheer for them. And that was always so much fun. That's what I enjoyed the most. S Hunt 1990 says they've aired up to your match with Mance. Okay. Movie Mance. That was a great match. So this is the early days. People forget that me and John Campia was the launch of the new relaunch movie Trivia Schmodown, because it was released the same day as Batman v Superman. That was the whole thing. Big rivalry. So that was kind of a lot of pressure, not just because it was sort of the new era of the Schmodown, but because I was a lot of people said that they were going to evaluate my value as a movie pundit or my knowledge based on whether or not I was going to be Campia. So I felt a lot of pressure in that first match. Damian Fenton says, what do you think is the best measure of audience reaction? IMDb rating, Letterboxd rating, or Rotten Tomatoes audience score? Honestly, I think it's looking at a combination of all of them. I think that they all have their own pitfalls. And also they have their own advantages. For example, with IMDb, right now I think the Odyssey has an 8.2 out of 10 on IMDb. But if you go look at it, like something like 10% of the ratings are 1-star ratings. So there's no regulation on if there's a review bombing going on, positive or negative. But often negative, there's really no regulation of that. So it's like, Rotten Tomatoes they have the verified audience thing, but it also is like, well, okay, but is that an accurate measure of how many people have actually seen it? Because verified audience, that means you're voting through Fandango. It means that not everybody's going to do it. I rarely vote, on my app after I see a movie. So how reflective is that? So there's a few more barriers to entry. And then Letterboxd, that's kind of a different crowd. That's more of a cinephile crowd. They're going to be easier or harder on some movies than people who aren't necessarily into the same thing. So to me, it is taking the totality of it. Look at what all of those scores say. And that to me gives me a basic idea of what audiences think, rather than just taking one of them and saying it's that one. That's the best metric. Shocking, I know, for a numbers guy to say, well, you should look at all the numbers. Ivan Polanco, 6445, just sent in a donation. Thank you very much, Ivan. I appreciate that. This is from Heidi or Heidi 99. Hello from the UK. The Odyssey is sold out here in London in our standalone IMAX cinema in 70 millimeter until September. People obviously want to see it. I might have to bite the bullet and go at some point. Keep up the good work. I mean, I would love to see it in 70 millimeter IMAX. As I said, the critic screening I went to was in 70 millimeter, but not 70 millimeter IMAX. And I would love to see it. I don't think I've ever seen, actually, I may have seen. No, I don't think it was in 70 millimeter. I think Dune Part 1 on film in IMAX, but I don't know if it was a 70 millimeter print, but it looked incredible. I would love to see the Odyssey in 70 millimeter on print, 70 millimeter IMAX film. Crazy Cobalt says, on charts, would you consider breaking down box office by genre for the year, like horror versus superhero? Just tag if money crosses over, like Venn diagram. That would be interesting. My problem is, and it's why I don't do a whole lot of genre stuff. There is never a direct line or a straight line over what genre any movie is. So when I did my top grossing horror movies domestically, people used to get comments every time. The Sixth Sense, what's the Sixth Sense doing on this list? That's not a horror movie. And then I applied a metric that disqualified the Sixth Sense. And now every time I do it, it's like, where's the Sixth Sense? You forgot the Sixth Sense. So I just generally don't like to open myself up to those arguments because they're unwinnable. Whether you put a movie in or leave a movie out, nobody is going to be happy with it. And so I try not to do a whole lot of genre specific stuff, but that is an interesting idea. I just think that the line is a little too fuzzy between genres for me to say this one's here and that one's there before it just devolves into a never ending series of arguments over what's eligible and what's not eligible. Ivan Polanco 6445 says, was it any group of women into a water slide? LOL. That was the inside joke that Spencer wrote into the Troy Honest Trailer. He said Brad Pitt turned any group of women into a water slide. And I was like, I texted Spencer. I'm like, I see what you did there, and I appreciate it. HV Long One says, what movie are you looking forward to that isn't big IP? Longtime fan. I'm one of the few people who was disappointed in Endgame and not looking forward to Doomsday. Thanks. I would say the end of Oak Street is intriguing to me in August. I mean, I think there's a high probability that it's going to be interesting concept, but disappointing movie. We'll see. But that's the next one for me that I'm looking at where I'm saying, oh, okay, that's one that's not part of a big franchise where I'm really excited to see just what's going on with that film. Geek Factor says, what would you say is the difference between a writer using AI to brainstorm an idea and Quentin Tarantino rehashing his favorite bits from B movies? Again, it's up to the writer. Again, if you're using AI to brainstorm and you see an idea there and then you make something original out of that idea, that to me is a lot different than using AI to contribute to the actual text of the script that you're writing. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but if you're just using it as a brainstorming tool, okay. Quentin Tarantino, obviously he takes bits and pieces from movies that he likes and then he reshapes them and reforms them. But that work of his that he does is still an original work. And if you take an idea from an AI brainstorm and make an original work out of it, then I think that's different from using AI to actually write parts of your screenplay. And those are the discussions I think need to be had. And that's why I say I'm not a huge fan of AI, specifically in applications that have to do with the craft in the sense of, threatening people's jobs, et cetera. But when it comes to creativity, if you're not using it to infringe on rights, I I allow for some personal license for what people choose to do and choose not to do. And I'm not necessarily a hardliner saying everything AI is bad. I just think that it should always be approached with caution. That's where I am personally. I think we're down to our last few questions. So if you haven't sent any questions in, hold them till next week, please. And I will answer those questions next week because we just have a couple left here. Sakaki Chrono says, I took your advice a few weeks ago after seeing your review to go and watch the new Minions movie on the 4th of July. It was surprisingly great, just like you said it would be. I hadn't seen any Minions movies prior either. Well, you came in at the right time. You saw the best one and didn't have to suffer through any of the other ones. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's so funny how things work. The one that I liked is the one that people didn't want to go see. It kind of had to be that way, though, right? It's funniest if I finally enjoy a Minions movie and it comes in, way below the other Minions movies. Like that's kind of the only funny way to conclude that situation. So I'm glad you enjoyed it and didn't have to suffer through the other ones like I did. I won't say who, but I did get a message from somebody who was a key creative on Minions and Monsters, who said that they appreciated my review. And I said, even though I trashed the other Minions movies, and they're like, yeah, I actually was kind of touched that it connected with you in that way because that was the intention. So this was obviously a passion project for people that made the movie as well, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it. JD Howe 916 says, any thoughts on Sony via Alamo Drafthouse purchasing the Cinerama Dome? JD, you may have joined us a little bit late. You can rewind to right before I start taking questions because I talked about that a little bit. Thank you, though, for sending that in. And I believe, unless something comes in late, this is the last question. Andy A 9050 says, saw Odyssey, good parts at end, but sadly didn't like. Keep up good work. Just too long, and the guilt was repressive. Making AI might be interesting, but I have my doubts. Not a fan of AI. And a lot of people aren't a fan of AI. And also your thoughts on the Odyssey, that's totally, that's the other thing that I hate is that the discussion around the Odyssey gets so divisive that then people are sorted into solely two camps. Those thoughts about the Odyssey, like, the end of it I liked, but I didn't really like this part. And like, it just felt a little too gloomy and focused on guilt. Perfectly valid. And I feel about some people, it's like, oh, sorry, you're a chud or whatever, because you didn't like the movie. It's everybody needs to have more nuance with everything. That's what I think. Everybody needs to have more nuance in just about everything. There are very few things, I think, that are completely unnuanced where there's no room for discussion. I think there are some absolutes where there's no room, but everybody needs to just learn to talk to each other a little bit better and chill out just a little bit. Let's see. Let me just run through these comments real quick and see if anything jumps out at me. Golly, you guys, I feel bad if I don't always have a lot of time to jump in here, but you guys have been saying a lot of stuff in the comments. I don't really, let's see. We have a 70 millimeter IMAX theater here, so I'm going to go see it there, but I can't before next week. So yeah, a lot of people can't see it for weeks and weeks and weeks. Let's see. Ajoy 4547 says, do you have time to go to church on Sundays? Sometimes I'm not going to comment too much on my personal choices, but I try to make sure that I always have time for myself. I don't just do work all the time. Dunes Day. It's Barbenheimer all over again. Well, they're certainly trying to do that. They're certainly trying to make it that thing. I think it feels a little bit forced, if you ask me. I don't think the World Cup had an impact on European box office because the match was at 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. here. That is an excellent point. I didn't even think about that. That's an excellent point. I did not realize that that would have been the case. But yeah, good point there. Audience Rotten Tomato score being verified makes it more legit than those otherwise, which are inflated often. I would say otherwise they could also be deflated often. I think we see it both ways. David Johnson says, I'm unable to donate, but I just wanted to thank you, Dan. Your regular show got me through a tough year. Thank you very much. Honestly, being able to do my show got me through a tough year, especially last year. So I'm glad that we could sort of be mutually beneficial to each other because, yeah. Welcome to the internet, and I hope you're doing better, by the way. Welcome to the internet, where the worst thing you can possibly be is wrong. I mean, I think we're getting it right now into a world where it seems like the worst thing you could ever be is wrong. Christopher Potts 9742. Ghost pepper chicken sandwich from Popeyes is the best. Okay, that's a good one. It's controversial, but I'm a big fan of Culver's spicy chicken sandwich. All right, see, you're talking my. See, here we go. Also, Chick-fil-A spicy chicken sandwich. So this is what I like: is you were listening to me and you picked up from what I was saying that for me the spicy chicken sandwich is the way to go. So now I have 3 great recommendations on a spicy chicken sandwich. I'll try all of those. This isn't a mukbang channel, so I don't know if I'll do them online, but I'll do all of them. Let's see. Let's get one more here. From Red Carpet Talk, I love the invite. Surprisingly liked it even more on rewatch. Yeah, I keep wanting to go back and see it again, but it's just tough to go back and rewatch movies. I mean, I probably wouldn't even go back and watch the Odyssey again if I had seen it in IMAX already. But I just feel like you haven't seen it until you've seen it in IMAX. At least that's what I think. All right. Thank you to everybody who sent in a question. Thank you to everybody who watched, who tuned in. We did about an hour, 40 minutes today. Some great questions this week. Thanks for listening to me talk about the Odyssey and AI and Cinerama and all the stuff we talked about. Stay tuned. Like I said, I'm going to try to be more consistent, but bear with me a little bit because the summer weeks are a bit harder because I'm traveling more. I'm going to be traveling for 2 days out of the week next year in order to see Spider-Man. And so hopefully we'll be able to do a show this time next week. But do bear with me if I have to take a week or 2 off here and there. Trust me, it's not because I'm being lazy. It's just because the summer schedule is nuts, but we're almost to the end of it. It's crazy. We're almost at the end of July. Thanks to everybody who watched. Thanks to everybody who sent in a great question and really just generally for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it because I couldn't do what I do without you. Have a great day. I'll see you soon. Bye.